Billy Napier and the Florida Gators have been incredibly active on the recruiting trail. But what's the latest on some Florida Gator targets? We'll find out here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Check out BetOnline. It's where the game starts. Happy Friday. The weekend's here. I'm Brandon Olson. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find my written work with Whole Nine Sports and Giants Country of SI.com. Had a video come out for Whole Nine yesterday on YouTube. Yay, we finally got there. Before getting into today's content, just going to remind you, September 1st, September 2nd, September 1st at 7 p.m., September 2nd, 5:30 p.m., live Locked On Gators recordings. It's free. You can go there at The Social in Midtown in Gainesville. Also, just going to ask you to like, comment, subscribe, leave a review, share the video, do whatever it is. But I thank you for your support. Now I'm going to be joined by John Garcia, Sports Illustrated's Director of Football Recruiting. Joining me now for Locked On Gators is John Garcia, Sports Illustrated's Director of Football Recruiting and Locked On's Recruiting Insider. And before talking about what is hopefully going to continue being a busy August for the Florida Gators, I'd like to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And John, Wednesday night, this was something that, I feel like there was murmurs about this for a little while. But Keon Keeley, 5-star edge, recently decommitted from Notre Dame. I know that Alabama's in play. I know Ohio State's in play. I believe he's visiting Ohio State when they play Notre Dame, if I'm not mistaken.
Very fun storyline.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm excited for this. But what is the latest on Keon Keeley and his recruitment now?
Yeah, so we're learning a lot about Notre Dame and their policies under first-year head coach Marcus Freeman. For all the praise he's gotten for being a young, modern, energetic, bold recruiter, there's some old school in him as well. And when Keon took that trip to Alabama at the very end of July, there was some contention between he and the coaching staff. And there is a thought that, almost Clemson-esque, hey, if you're committed, probably not going to take any trips, under our watch. So there was, some conversations had as far as I understand it. And Keon basically doubled down saying, hey, I'm going to continue to take visits. So why don't I go ahead and decommit from Notre Dame? So I do think they're still in it, but typically, hard to come back from a situation like that. And simultaneously, Alabama got him on campus. Like you said, Ohio State is about to get him on campus in the next few weeks. And Florida's always been that in-state school that has been the biggest threat. I think even when he committed to Notre Dame and the first rumblings of, hey, maybe he's going to take visits started to come out, there was always this thought that, okay, well, Florida's going to be the top threat here. This is the top in-state school, the whole Tampa pipeline, all that stuff really works with the Gators here, but it just turned out that they weren't alone, which makes sense because this is the number one edge in America, number 3 overall recruit in the SI 99. So naturally, a lot of programs are going to be in on him. So I think now that he takes a step back, he can really live out all his visit fantasies. He can go to Notre Dame, he can go to Ohio State, Bama, Florida. Maybe someone else gets involved. Why wouldn't they, right? If they feel like this is a recruitment that is now reset and truly open, maybe other schools get involved. And then they can get in the mix and get them on campus down the line. But again, going back to Florida, this was always viewed as the top threat overall, really until that Alabama visit. I would say we considered Florida to be the top overall threat if Keon was to make a move away from Notre Dame. The Bama visit started to change that, and there is some confidence growing in Tuscaloosa. But look, I say this on the Miami pod. I say this on this pod. I say this on Auburn, Clemson, Georgia. If you want to compete, you got to go head-to-head with Nick and beat him. straight up. It's very simple. You got to go at the king to try to get to the throne. And I do think that this could be one of those hotly contested battles that probably goes the entire distance now because he is totally open and reset. And we know visits are going to start to get planned. I think he only took 1 or 2 officials. So there's a lot of room for Keon to hit the road and really figure out exactly what he wants in his future college destination. So Bama's going to be in it till the end. I think Florida's going to be in it until the end. We'll see about Ohio State. And Notre Dame's still there too. So if you want to be considered an SEC power, a potential college football playoff program, these are the kind of recruitments you have to dig into and ultimately win down the line. So tough tasks, tall task, all those things, but you're in the ball game if you're Florida at this point, and that's a position that dozens of programs wish that they were in.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Freeman with Notre Dame, I guess, is Charmin, softness you could see. And then there's another edge prospect that Florida is looking at and trying to get in Qua Russaw. What's the latest on him and Florida's pursuit of him?
We're talking Qua Russaw here.
Yes, sir.
This is one of the most intriguing evaluations we had in constructing the SI 99. A guy who is certainly most comfortable on the edge rushing the passer, but man, his speed, his motor, over 100 tackles as a junior, it really kind of pushed us to a linebacker projection where I think he can go and walk down and rush the passer, but he also brings a lot of value at the second level from a traditional standpoint where he can run the defense, play the run, cover a tight end or a running back out of the backfield when he's not rushing the passer. So this is truly one of the better do-it-all linebackers in the class and probably one of the pound-for-pound strongest players in the class. Of course, Quay was down at Florida for the very first time at Friday Night Lights and really loved his first impression. He really felt like a priority. There's this sense around he and James Smith, who we'll talk about next. They are a package deal, and it's very real. I think in our business, we scoff at package deals because they don't usually work out. We're like, oh, you're saying you're a package deal. Like, okay, we'll believe it when we see it. But these two are really connected at the hip. And I think from the Florida perspective, you've always had more chances with Russaw than Smith, but they took the visit together. And Russaw, in a lot of ways, leads that duo. They're opposites, right? Introvert, extrovert, outgoing, more reserved, all those things. But behind closed doors, Russaw is kind of the Captain America of this thing, and James Smith is more, Hulk or Iron Man, where he's right there. But it just seems like when things are even, it breaks Quay's way. So Quay was the one who I think had more interest in getting down to Florida comparatively to James. But once they both got down there, they really enjoyed the impression. It's SEC ball, which, these are 2 Montgomery kids. So they grew up, of course, following the SEC most closely. And then Quay's got an interesting tie to the Gators. His dad is from the state of Florida and is a massive, and I mean a massive Gator fan. He told Quay, according to one person close to Quay, that your recruitment is your own thing. Go do your own thing. But if and when you visit Florida, let me know because I'm coming. So he ends up coming for the back end of the FNL trip and really enjoyed it. And then they were able to bond a little bit more together. So I do think that's an interesting X factor from Florida's perspective. And again, when you think of the package deal element between he and James, there's a couple of schools where one guy is like selling the other. I think for Quay selling James, it's Florida and maybe Auburn. And with James selling Quay, I think it's Ohio State and Bama. James's family's from Ohio, so there's a little bit of OH in that bloodline. So it's interesting because, of course, they're package deals. So the same top 6. Alabama State is in there. Shout out to the Hornets. But really, it's about these SEC programs and Ohio State, to me, in the conversation. I think Georgia's a bit of a dark horse. Bama feels safe. And Florida's kind of the wild card of this thing. Now that they've taken the unofficial visit for FNL, the next step for Gators fans is, can we get an official? Can we get these guys back down for a game weekend, center it on an official visit against a marquee opponent, and then you play from there. But again, I do think with Russaw in particular, Florida's probably higher in his top 6 than James is at this moment, but they have not ruled out the possibility of taking an official to UF. And I think that's huge news. And that would be the next natural step in this progression, because I think both guys are going to take this thing all the way. So there's a lot of time still, 4 months or so, between now and pen meeting paper for a national letter of intent. So if you're a Gators fan, Quay is closer in your camp, and you want to get them to take an official visit. That's really the next step for Florida in this recruitment. But certainly Bama's going to be tough to beat. Georgia's in there, and I think Ohio State is probably that other school that you got to worry about. But it's a long way away from a final decision. So you've got to kind of stay in the hunt thereafter. And that natural next step is certainly getting them back on campus.
I would just like to say real quick that I'm pretty upset you made an Avengers reference, and I have
Oh boy.
Thor's hammer right here, and you just didn't say it. You just didn't say it.
He's
And he's the most powerful.
it's evolved, it's changed. That dynamic of leadership has changed. He's still certainly incredibly important, but it's flawed a little bit in his arc. Blame the MCU for that. Don't blame me.
I will always blame the MCU, and I will say he's most powerful, worst leader you could possibly have. That's how I say it. He's a god. Come on. But we're about to talk about James Smith. But first, a quick word from BetOnline. Think the Florida Gators are going to win 7 or more games this year? Think they'll win 7 or less games this year? Right now, BetOnline, the Gators win total is set at 7. So if you think they're going to win more, or they might win more, bet the over. And if they win exactly 7, you get your money back. It's a push. If you think they're going to win less than 7, if they win exactly 7, you get your money back. It's a push. Whatever. Ties suck, but it is what it is. At least you don't lose money. BetOnline's your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports information. I've been using BetOnline for years now. Couldn't be happier with it. It's got so much, not just football, baseball, basketball, soccer, hockey, tennis, table tennis, darts, League of Legends, Counter-Strike Go, economics, politics. You can bet on aliens invading and who will get invaded first if aliens do decide to invade, when they decide to invade. Check out BetOnline. It's where the game starts. And we're back with Locked On Gators. Joining me now is John Garcia, Sports Illustrated's Director of Football Recruiting. And we're going to keep talking about Florida Gators recruits here and targets. And we just spoke a little bit about James Smith, but what we didn't talk about is who is James Smith as a player. We know that Quay is they're opposites. Quay is the edge that you have projected as a linebacker, and James Smith is a defensive lineman right now. But what is James Smith's role in college football?
Well, he is your outgoing Christian Wilkins, ferocious defensive tackle that is going to make you laugh. But then when he's in between the lines, he's an animal. There's really no other way to put it. Great kid and a guy who's really reshaped his body. He is ready to go as a senior. Again, seeing both of them at Friday Night Lights, I was kind of stricken by both. Quay, because he is a sculpted Thor-like linebacker, and James because he is trimmed down to about 298, 300 pounds. He's going to play under 300 pounds this year per his trainers over at the Madhouse in Montgomery. And that's scary because we've seen him dominate at 310, 315. He was down at IMG briefly and really flashed as a bigger kind of classic interior guy. But now if he's playing a little bit leaner and lighter, there's a whole lot of fear that's going to be put into these high school offensive lines. They play for the same high school team, by the way. So you've got Russaw on the edge and then James on the interior. Like, God bless those offensive lines that Carver High School will face. But James, I do think, brings so much strength and power to the interior, but he's also got this finesse side. He swears he's a great basketball player. And he was like, I'm going to hoop at Florida if I come here. I mean, I'm like, enjoy. There's a whole lot of 6'3", 300-pound forwards in college basketball, obviously. So, he's that kind of kid, but, he really is light on his feet. And he really is a guy who you could line up outside in a traditional 3-4 and let him go to work on a tackle. I've seen it at camp. I saw clips recently of him at Alabama's camp as a sophomore last year where he lined up outside on every rep, and he won battles against Miles McVay, who Bama just took as a verbal commitment. So this is an intriguing, true athlete at the defensive interior spot. And again, he's more trim. He's more ready to rock as a senior. And that's why his recruitment's been so heavily contested. I think James is one who he needed that first impression at Florida. That was certainly important because I do think for him, they were probably on the outside looking in going into that FNL visit. So as of, 4th of July, mid-July, I think he was leaning towards more Bama, Auburn, Georgia, Ohio State, schools like that. But I do think Florida made a very strong initial impression. We know there's a big need for Florida on the defensive interior. We've talked about it with you on the last 3 or 4 podcasts. So he understands that. He's a kid who's certainly unafraid of competition. So I wouldn't worry about all the other D linemen that Florida has been able to accumulate. And then on top of that, like we said last week, there's just this sense that Florida is going to go into Alabama every cycle. There's just a sense of that. And I do think that these two, I mean, obviously these two would be as big a get for any school in the state of Alabama as we've seen over the last decade. But individually, even, I think these would be monster gets for any school outside of the Yellowhammer State. But Florida did a good job of prioritizing him at FNL. And then, of course, now they got to work to get that return visit for an official visit, particularly for James. Again, I think Quay is a little further along in seeing things orange and blue than he is at this point. But they are truly tied at the hip. They are truly a package deal. So you can't get one without the other. So I do think that's important for Florida to keep in mind here going forward. But yeah, his talent is absolutely warranted for that type of priority level and consideration.
And then on the flip side of the trenches, Florida has been adding a lot of talent on the defensive line, not so much on the offensive line. They currently have more offensive line coaches than they have offensive line commits for the 2023 class.
What a stat.
be better, and I can't say that about you. But Monroe Freeling is someone who I know we've talked about before. I've been wanting him, and now I've got listeners asking about him. So what's the latest on Monroe Freeling and his recruitment?
He's really kind of quiet right now. I think there's a sense of wide openness in this recruitment. There have been shifts in this recruitment. We heard Notre Dame early. We heard South Carolina more recently. Georgia, Alabama, Miami has been involved here. Florida, obviously, involved in this race. And it's quite interesting to me because there's really no, at least from what I've seen as of today, there's no clear timeline. There's no clear date. There's no clear anything in this recruitment, which usually means it's going to linger into the season. So you start to wonder, will he take visits? What games is he going to prioritize, with he and his family? And I think, a lot of these other schools simultaneously, Brandon, are filling up. Miami's at 5 O-line commits. Bama's, I think, at 5 O-line commits. Notre Dame is at 5 O-line commits. Clemson's not quite there yet. Neither is Georgia or Florida. So if you look at it from his perspective, and if he says, look, I want this clear path among these great schools, what's the clearest path to playing time? Florida, Georgia, Clemson start to feel like more of a no-brainer in that conversation because there are obviously bigger offensive lines already on board at half of the schools that he's really considering at this stage. And maybe that's part of the reason why this thing has been delayed a little bit, trying to figure out and navigate exactly where he falls on these different recruiting boards at offensive tackle. I think that's going to be fascinating to see play out, and we'll see if he starts taking some visits. I think that will be probably our next indicator for Monroe Freeling, but I do think he's taking his time, and he should. It's him and Samson Okunlola among the elite offensive tackles remaining, so there's no rush for either of those guys to put the pedal to the metal. We see that at other positions where they can kind of take their time and not be rushed into a decision. And I think that's a good thing for this offensive line board and a good thing for Florida because they have that hole to sell on the commitment list, right? D-line stacked, receivers stacked. You got your quarterback. Things are coming together. Secondary is looking really good. You got to hit the trenches on offense now moving forward from that Florida perspective. So you can sell Monroe Freeling on, hey, you're the top guy left. There's a huge need at offensive tackle. Come to the swamp, come to a game, and let's go from there. So I think, again, logically, that's the next step in that recruitment.
Yeah, I mean, you can go look at all the defensive line commits we have. Iron sharpens iron. You'll see them in practice. There are as many people in this podcast as there are currently committed to the Florida Gators offensive line for the 2023 class. So look at all the opportunity that you can get there.
Yeah.
Hey, Yeah, I'll take my shots when I can. But we've talked about a lot of defensive linemen over the past few weeks. You mentioned that. And we've talked about, I mean, Qua Russaw and James Smith as a two-man wrecking crew, but there's a one-man wrecking crew that we're going to talk about now in Kayden McDonald, who we were talking about it before. Productive. He's productive. We'll say that. What's the latest on Kayden McDonald, his recruitment?
Yeah, I'd love to get the game by game film here to see if his numbers really are what they are projected to be. But either way, like you said, a truly disruptive interior defensive lineman who lives in the backfield, 6'3", 305 or so, really carries it well, incredibly strong at the point of attack, just moves bodies. You'd almost move him to offensive line and feel good about it if it did come to that down the line. But yeah, his recruitment, because of his great banner breakout, whatever you want to call it, 2021 season has really allowed his recruitment to start to hit closer to its ceiling. And a lot of programs have become involved because of that. Florida's been in it for a while. I think he took multiple visits to the Swamp this offseason, including that cookout deal at the end of July, which is important because that's the last visit that any kid could take going into the season. So you want that impression at UF to be a fresh one. And that was after an official, right? So you feel really good about that. But Georgia's in the mix now. Michigan got him on campus this offseason. They're still in the conversation. Texas offered him like yesterday. So you wonder if maybe they're not too late in this conversation. So I do wonder, only having taken, I believe, one official, what his fall looks like. I know he wants to take several visits. Clemson could stay in the mix here as well. So I'm wondering where he's going to head for some trips this season, and you wonder what that Florida impression over the summer, which was the one he became most familiar with, you wonder how that matches up with an in-state Georgia offer, Texas, and some of these other schools that are certainly clamoring to get him on campus. There was a thought that maybe he pops sooner rather than later. And now I'm probably leaning towards the other way, where maybe he takes his time because he continues to add options and opportunities at different programs. So you probably want to vet those if you can before all is said and done. But there's no doubt that Florida's in the thick of this thing. He's got a public top 10 that's probably more like a top 5 out right now. But either way, based on his metric or our metric, Florida's going to be in the thick of this recruitment all the way through. And again, it's a huge need in general. And there are a lot of targets out there. So you want to stay in the mix for as many elite ones as you can. Your James Smiths of the world, your McDonald's of the world. And Florida's doing a really good job of that. Because I think a lot of other programs, from an organizational perspective, would start to almost play their way out of the race because they've got so many verbal commitments, yet you're still trying to sell something that is available among the defensive interior projections. So that's obviously great communication and transparency from that Florida staff.
Yeah, and then there's one more player to talk about today, and it's an edge rusher that we've talked about quite a bit. I mean, half the people we've talked about today are edge rusher linebacker types. Samuel Mpemba, IMG Academy. How close is Florida to maybe adding to their IMG pipeline that they're trying to set up, but is right now still pretty dry, but that they're trying to set up?
Hey, 2 commitments so far. We'll see how it goes going forward. Yeah, and Pemba, a freaky edge talent, one of the best edge rushers in this class of 2023, a guy who I think is top 25 for us at SI All-American, and that number is only going to go up. He's only really dedicated an off season to the edge position. This kid was backing up Jaleel Skinner at tight end last year when we saw IMG play, but really hit the ground running at edge. Had a couple sacks in the spring game working against Francis Mauigoa, which is a big deal for any defensive lineman. And his profile continues to rise in that regard. But there's a lot of schools in this. Miami, Florida are certainly the 2 in-state schools that are in the best position, but Tennessee has made a charge. LSU has always been involved. Georgia, Notre Dame are long involved in this recruitment and have felt really good at times. I think 6 months ago, Notre Dame felt really good. Georgia probably more recently has felt really good about this Samuel Mpemba conversation. So it looks like he's going to continue to take visits and kind of keep his foot off the gas here and take a bunch of visits. Florida got him on campus for FNL, where Will Norman was his tour guide as if he was a verbal commitment, which at that point he was not. But of course now he is. So we know there's a huge desire for IMG recruits there at Florida, and Mpemba knows he's a priority with Billy Napier and company. And I asked him last time I talked to him, I said, you got options all over the country. How do you view Florida and Miami? And he really made a great argument on how balanced those two approaches are. And look, both of them are top 10 recruiting teams that have had hot recruiting summers with first year coaches. So he kind of views them differently. He views the Miami locale as something that is certainly impressive to him as kind of a city guy, originally from St. Louis. But at the same time, Florida and that SEC prowess, that defensive focus that the Gators have always seemingly gotten the benefit of the doubt on, balances out that comparison to Miami, who of course is in the ACC. So it's interesting to see how these recruits view some of these programs, and he views them kind of similarly, which is, I think, outside of this bubble and outside of maybe the Miami bubble is really common. That's really how a lot of people view these two programs right now with these first year coaches. So it would be kind of funny and fitting if it came down to those two in the end, right? You're an IMG kid, now you're focused on Florida, let's say the state of Florida, and it comes down to these two schools. I mean, that will be another clear head-to-head battle between the two that seems like a coin flip at this point. His last visit weekend, he was at FNL and then got in the car and went to Miami for their barbecue the next day. So again, even in the free time he has, he's really balancing out these two options between Florida and Miami. Again, others are involved. Georgia's probably today the school I would peg as the leader, but this thing's got, December written all over it from a timeline perspective. I don't think he's taken any officials. So there's a long way to go in this Samuel Mpemba recruitment. But, when you're the number 2 or 3 edge in the country, I mean, there's a reason for that. Again, he has that luxury to wait the allotted time.
Yeah, and I think it's getting to the point on the recruiting trail and just all the trash talk where it's like when Florida and Miami play each other, Billy and Mario are going to have to fight first of all, and then me and Alex Dono are going to fight also.
Sign me up for that one first. Let me know. Let me know. I'll be the ref.
Okay, I'm gonna win. I'll let you know. I've told Dono, I'm like, I'll just know I'm not gonna take it easy on you. Thank you, John, for coming in. This is John Garcia, Sports Illustrated's Director of Football Recruiting, Locked On's Recruiting Insider, and you'll find him all over the Locked On College channel and find him on Twitter at JohnGarcia_JR.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. We'll be back Monday. Tomorrow is the first time since I believe July 21st or July 19th that we didn't have a Locked On Gators episode come out. So that was a wild ride. And who knows? Maybe something will happen tomorrow. We will have content come out. But for now, the plan is Monday. Make your second listen Locked On SEC, hosted by Chris Gordy of Sports 790. Get the best coverage on the best conference, including the best University of Florida. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olson. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find my written work with Whole Line Sports, video work with Whole Line Sports on YouTube, and written work with GiantsCountryFSI.com. And I'll see you all tomorrow, Monday.